Up next, Authentically Detroit welcomes Marcia Black and Lex Draper Garcia Bey, co-executive directors of the Black Bottom Archives, to discuss how they're working to uncover and restore our stories as Black Detroiters. But first, this week's hot takes from the Michigan Chronicle. We're talking about Black mayors backing Jocelyn Benson for Michigan governor. We're talking about former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who has been capitulating to both conservatives and liberals during his independent campaign for governor. He said last week, that the pain when ICE is in our communities is very real. We're going to be talking about why he feels the need to say that, while also defending ICE. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages.
Interested in renting space for corporate events, meetings, conferences, social events, or resource fairs? The Stoudemire Wellness Hub and Match Detroit Small Business Hub are available for rental by members, residents, businesses, and organizations. We offer rentals for activities such as corporate events, social events, meetings, conferences, art classes, fitness classes, and more. To learn more about our rentals and reserve space, visit ecn-detroit.org/space rental.
What's up, Detroit? Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from Detroit's East Side at the Stoudemire, inside of the East Side Community Network. I'm Sam Robinson.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
Thank you so much for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. We're here today with the co-executive directors of the Black Bottom Archives, Marcia Black and Lex Draper Garcia Bey. They're going to discuss how they're working to uncover and restore our stories as Black Detroiters. Before we begin, we want to make a correction from last week's episode for those wishing to contact Stephanie Wright Griggs. She can be reached at this email address. It is sgriggsc@aol.com. Again, that is sgriggsc@aol.com. Marcia and Lex, welcome to Authentically Detroit. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Very, very good. Thanks for having us.
Oh, we're so glad to have you.
Yeah.
It's been a long time in the making. I've wanted you to come on, and I don't know if we were just two ships passing the night, but this Black History Month is so important for us to be talking about two Black Bottom Archives.
It is. And before I started the show, mentioned that their exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum, fantastic place, is right there. It's on the upper floor, right? Mm-hmm. You go up and then you go to the second or third floor, I believe. I've seen different exhibits in there, but that one that's in there right now, I mean, it's comprehensive. It's incredibly impressive. Encourage everyone listening to go check that out.
Agreed.
All right. It's time for Hot Takes. We're going to run down some of the top headlines in the city of Detroit from the past week. The first story that we're looking into, coming off of the Black Summit, that was an event that happened in Benton Harbor. I was not able to make it out there. Black Mayors Association, this is a group led by the mayor of Benton Harbor. They announced that they are putting their full support behind Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State and Democratic candidate for governor. She is touting this endorsement. Jocelyn Benson is somebody that we know is going to face question marks because of her racial discrimination lawsuit against her office by some former employees. The quote from Mayor Marcus Muhammad, Jocelyn Benson has shown time and time again that she will always protect Michiganders and fight to ensure that we have the resources we need to thrive. As a student of the civil rights movement, she knows economic prosperity and equity go hand in hand. We look forward to collaborating with her as governor to continue the work of building a more affordable, equitable, and fair society. Benson tells me at the heart of her campaign is a vision to build a state that everyone can afford, which means investing in the state's Black communities. Last week when I talked to her at the MEA, this is the Michigan Education Association annual conference, that they had a gubernatorial debate. They had Mike Duggan, Mike Cox, Jocelyn Benson and Chris Swanson on the same stage. Jocelyn Benson talked about making the playing field equitable, saying, kids in Midland and Traverse City are not going to have the same issues as kids in Benton Harbor or Grand Rapids or Saginaw or what have you. But I think, Donna, you would agree with me that I think we're still the folks that are skeptical of, and this is just what I hear from voters, the people that are skeptical of Jocelyn, this endorsement is not going to move them.
Well, I mean, I think it's really a matter of politics, right? So we don't always get to vote for candidates we like. We get to vote for candidates who are on the ballot. And unfortunately, on the ballot, you'll probably have Jocelyn Benson, Mike Duggan, and John James or some other Republican. And people are going to have to decide who is going to best protect the city of Detroit and the residents in the city of Detroit. We can't base it on personality or who we like. It's very hard for me to think through independent governor at a time when Wes Moore was uninvited to the White House, and he is the vice chair or something like that of the Governors Association, and yet he was uninvited by the president for clearly racist reasons. And so we can't be race neutral. We can't pretend as though this is a level playing field and that we are not really at some type of social war for our rights as citizens. If somebody I don't like is running in campaigns, and most of the time, no offense, most of the time I vote for people I don't really like. I mean, these aren't my friends. We're not hanging out. We're not going to the club. They're not people I would necessarily trust with anything, but they are people who are taking a position and allied with people who I think are best equipped to protect my interest. And if you look at it through that narrow lens, then I think a lot of people will ultimately look at it through that narrow lens, you're going to see people who really may or may not trust Jocelyn Benson understanding the alternatives, because we'll talk about the other candidate in a minute. But I think it's important for us to understand what we're up against.
Yeah. Benson's campaign has touted the fact that they've made efforts to engage with Black residents. She has said, Benson, that the next governor has a moral duty to address Black maternal health care. In a press conference last week in Flint, Benson suggested the creation of an independent prescription drug affordability panel and requiring hospitals to show costs up front. Of course, Jocelyn she started her career in Alabama, researching hate crimes at the Southern Poverty Law Center. She worked for Damon Keith as a clerk. So she's going to have folks standing behind her. She doesn't have Wendell Anthony standing behind her. However, she's going to have.
Has he taken a stand?
Yeah, he's supporting Duggan.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, the NAACP president, the Detroit branch, at least. Talking about Duggan, I want to switch gears. This same panel that happened at the Renaissance Center on 2 Fridays ago, not last Friday, but the Friday after last Friday. Duggan took the stage and really had the most to say about ICE when asked. Chris Swanson, the Genesee County Sheriff, talked about, he doesn't want to see ICE in schools or in places of worship. Didn't articulate how he would do it, but said, I would ensure as governor that we'd be standing up to the Trump administration. Jocelyn kind of left it at, I would stand up to the Trump administration. She did not get into details about how ICE would, how she would prevent ICE from operating in the state.
What specifically was Duggan going to do?
Well, here's what he said. Mm-hmm. He acknowledged that this is a issue that creates pain. He says the pain when ICE is in your community is very real.
That quote reminds me of the quote, "ICE is cold." Really?
He says he's had to deal with it in Detroit for 12 years as mayor. Duggan, throughout his campaign, has drawn comparisons between him and his opponents by suggesting he doesn't have to tell voters what he would do, but he has already done, saying what he has already done as mayor.
I would like to know what he's done in Detroit. When the police department in the city of Detroit has been complicit with ICE in arresting people, As mayor, when did he ever stand up and say no ICE in my community? When people said they wanted to turn Detroit into a sanctuary city, he said no. And so this is doublespeak. This is his police.
Well, I'll tell you what he did, because it is true that the city of Detroit did not sign a sort of agreement with the federal government that all other Republican cities did, and he'll say that to say I did. I mean, he said this on stage. He said, we did everything we could to protect it, which
he
you
says
and
that,
Curtis Hertel and others would
he
say,
says,
what are you talking about,
well,
Mike Duggan?
I mean, look, he says that. It's not me and others. I mean, talk to people in Southwest Detroit. Talk to Gabby Santiago Romero and ask
she
her
would
what's
disagree.
been happening in her community. Ask the various people who are living there and still defending themselves. And by the way, ICE is not just coming after Latino people. They're coming after African. They're coming after Haitian. They're coming after the diaspora, African diaspora as well. And we did not have a mayor who stood up for us. When people came down from upstate Michigan, I'll never forget this, to Detroit to try to stop the 2020 counting of votes, his police chiefs stood to the side and allowed them to harass people and said they have a right to vote. But when organizers got together and said Black Lives Matter, his police chief, and actually deputy mayor, attacked them, arrested them, zip-tied their hands for not doing anything. He had people, and then tried to prosecute them. And then when the judge threw it out of court, tried to prosecute them again. So I don't want to hear about how somebody's going to defend people when they had a position to defend people and they did not. I will look at his record as mayor, and I see it. I think it's lacking.
Yeah, he will point out that he did not enter what they're called our 287G agreements, where the police become sort of an arm in ICE enforcement, and like the federal government can take over a police.
Well, the city council,
operation.
I believe, passed an ordinance that said that Detroit was not going to be in that position. So I think it's not just him. I think that ordinances get passed, and maybe I'm mistaken, by city council and not by the mayor. And I think that he may have, to some extent, followed the ordinance, but I do not believe that he lived up to the spirit of the ordinance, nor do most of the people I know who are still being victimized by ICE.
Sure, and just this past week, we, of course, thanks to Violet Ikonomova's reporting, know that Detroit police are, in fact, coordinating with federal immigration agents. 2 Detroit police officers, according to Todd Bettison, were suspended over the weekend for doing just that.
Has there been a police officer who was suspended under Duggan for the same thing?
Yeah, I don't think so. If this were not to have been Violet standing outside there, this was right outside Grand Circus Park downtown. So a journalism win, just so everybody knows, this story about these 2 suspended police officers is not happening without the reporter standing there asking the police, what is happening? What is happening? What is occurring? The police never responded, of course. When the Free Press brings it to the police department, they have to say, yes, this was not our policy, and we will punish these folks. Of course, when they do that, it's going to create this huge backlash from the police union and from Republican voters watching and commenting under the comments. You guys are familiar with those folks. And so it's very interesting. Duggan knows that he's playing this game of trying to appeal to conservatives, but not those kind of conservatives. Trying to appeal to liberals when he talks about the pain of ICE is very real, but not those kind of liberals.
Well, what he's doing is he's attacking Democrats. He's not attacking Republicans. He's saying ICE is cold.
He certainly is not attacking Republicans.
He's not attacking Republicans the way he is attacking Democrats. So let's be really clear here. He's not being in the middle. He is his campaign rhetoric is designed to do one thing, and that is to attract Democrats away from the Democratic candidate. He is not staking out campaign positions that are controversial. He's not saying this is what Republicans did wrong last time. He's saying when Democrats had control of the state, they were so worried about transgender politics that that's the reason why we couldn't pass any bills to protect people. Even when his own colleague and the person he works with, Karen Whitsett, was the one who stopped it. And there's no legislation there to do that. Why didn't he talk about what Republicans did to stop all of these just measures from happening? You can't tell me that he's running in the center when I only hear attacks on one side.
It's so interesting. I wrote the initial headline a year ago that he was talking about the issue of transgender youth athletics. Yes. I did a headline after he had met with Arab doctors in Genesee County He had, according to my sources, talked about the war in Gaza, spoke about, his boys don't belong in girls' sports is the line that I was told. He told me that I misquoted him. And I said, okay, Mayor, what did you say? He didn't say. Of course, a year later, now he's saying this on stage. It's like kind of, I feel vindicated for my reporting.
And you are. That's why we appreciate you. That's why you're my co-host, right? Because we're going to speak truth. But the truth is that you have to look beyond what somebody says. You have to look at what they've done. He has a track record, a 12-year track record in Detroit. 12 years of me feeling unprotected in many ways, and this is just one. Whether it's water shutoffs or mass foreclosures for tax policy, mass demolitions that poison our community. Let's be really clear. This is not a person who is run based on a desire to promote racial equity. What he's run on is triumphalism in downtown Detroit, an area of the city that is developing in ways that neighborhoods have not. And then throwing out false rhetoric about how black people have benefited on his watch. Look at the median income when he came into office in the city of Detroit, and look at the median income now in the city of Detroit.
What about all the black wealth created in the neighborhoods that the University of Michigan study
all that
showed?
Black wealth, and yet the median income for the city of Detroit is about $37,000 a year. The median income when he got to office is about $29,000 a year. Add inflation, and you're talking about a flat income. You're not looking at if all this black wealth is happening in this black city, how we're not seeing it in the wealth of the people who live here. All of this data is being distorted by people who move downtown and don't even claim this city, as their own in many ways. So
some also question the ethical nature in which the surveys are presented because the city is paying for these U of M surveys.
I've definitely, you want to talk about being vindicated. I question that because the way that they look at black wealth is not scientifically valid. What they say is that they look at real estate, at property values in majority black neighborhoods. And if the property values increase, then because those neighborhoods are majority black, that means black people are the ones who got the wealth. As if gentrification is a new concept and we are not looking in our communities, seeing people, walking dogs, pushing baby carriages who are not from this community, as if we don't understand the wealth disparities between the people moving in who are driving up property values and the people who are already here whose property is not valued at that high.
And I want to just add in, I think gentrification is an interesting, word to bring up because when I talk about this with folks coming up or under, the Duggan orbit, typically that word is almost viewed as positive and it's a necessary thing, right? Where, well, this is how societies work.
No, I mean,
when you build more money into it, the people that were there before are no longer able to be there. And it's sort of a matter of fact.
I'm so glad we're talking to Black Bottom Archives because gentrification is not even just about economics. It's about erasure. It's erasure of our history, erasure of our identities, erasure of our rules, policies, our customs, and also pushing us out. And so if you view this as progress, that means to me that you have a racist mindset. Whether or not white supremacy is driving your thinking. It should never be that a people who have been oppressed and mistreated for so long and created this city, after everything was taken away, would not be the first to benefit when resources come back. That's what progress should look like. If you pay the dues, you get paid first. But instead, what we're seeing is a lot of people, good people, hardworking people who have to work twice as hard to maintain a home in Detroit, pay higher taxes, higher water bills, higher electric bills. People who have stuck it out, watch people's kids coming home from school, fix vacant lots next door because nobody else would, are being ignored while we are spending all of our money investing in places where they don't belong. And then we over-police those places, but we don't have police protection here.
I think that's a perfect time to head into our break. And on the next half of Authentically Detroit, we're going to be talking to Marcia and Lex about the Black Bottom Archives.
Winter classes have started at the Stoudemire Wellness Hub. From chair yoga and strength-based fitness to nutrition, cooking, and wellness-focused classes. There's something for every person and every starting point. At the Stoudemire, our hope is to offer movement, nourishment, and community to support you throughout the cold season. Learn more at ecn-detroit.org/classes or give us a call at 313-571-2800.
Welcome back. At the heart of the Black Bottom Archive's work are the people and their descendants who lived, worked, and built lives in Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. Their stories, their resilience, cultural contributions served as an inspiration for their organization. From entrepreneurs and artists to families and community leaders, these individuals embody the rich Black heritage they strive to preserve and celebrate. Marcia is a proud Detroiter, Black, queer, feminist, archivist, memory worker, and abolitionist organizer. Marcia is an alum of Marygrove College, where she received her bachelor's in political science and sociology, and an alum of the University of Texas, Austin. Shout out to U of T. They helped me get $12,000 from a Free Press grant this past year. I want to talk to you about being in Texas. You received a master's in women's and gender studies. You received a master's of science and information studies as well. You created and utilizes a Black, queer, feminist archival proxies in your work to ensure that Black people's agency, Black cultural memory practices, and Black liberation are always honored and centered in preservation work. Her life's work is to ignite and to support the development of the archivist that exists within each and every one of us, and to preserve and share histories of Black women, Black Detroit, and the Black radical tradition. Marcia is committed to Black liberation and believes that archiving and storytelling can be the tools to get us there. Now, Lex Garcia Bey, co-dreamer, fourth-generation Detroiter, raising fifth-generation Detroiters, and helper to humankind, her name's meaning, is a proud Walsh College graduate with a BBA in business administration and an MBA in management, specializing in organizational design and systems, an event curator, storyteller, and family archivist. Lex is dedicated to preserving and celebrating stories, starting with her own family and extending to broader communities. With over 2 decades of experience in logistical strategy for nonprofits, Lex is a powerhouse in community engagement, program development, and organizational design. She is known for her ability to align brands with organizations, fostering authentic collaborations that prioritize community needs and aspirations. Her expertise extends to curating events and programs that are meaningful as they are impactful, creating spaces where innovation flourishes, social impact is tangible, and dreams are made manifest. Pretty good intros, I would
Yes,
say.
I mean, 2 amazing, accomplished, brilliant women here to share their stories.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So I, of course, have to start by acknowledging that Black Bottom Archives was started by my daughter and PG Watkins, both of whom were in college at the time, and just trying to think through what stories could look like. I was a contributor to the newsletter they had and this effort to bring things together at a time when Blackness was not necessarily popular. You know, we were so busy trying to come back and be the comeback city, and it felt like narratives were being lost. At the time, they were living in D.C., and they could see what was happening in D.C., the quick gentrification and erasure of Blackness from the chocolate city, right? And so, wait a minute, how do we hold on to that in Detroit? And they came and created something. I remember Camille just being on the website, doing things, getting her friends together, and then she moved on, and then PG moved on. But they created a nucleus of something that you've built into something that's really amazing. And so, as I told you before, I feel sort of like a mother to Black Bottom Archives. I am so proud of you for first of all, for bringing your brilliance to this work, because both of you are very accomplished women. And also you have your own vision. And I want to hear what that vision is. What was it like when you picked it up, and where do you see yourself taking it? What is your vision?
I think a good way for us to start is, what was it? Maybe like 18 months or so ago, we decided that we needed a revamp of our mission statement, because our mission statement didn't feel like it was relevant to the work that we were actively doing and the direction that we wanted to go. And so we with our board and with the help of some consultants, we rewrote our mission statement, and it is that Black Bottom Archives is a living community archive committed to documenting and preserving the voices, histories, and legacies of Black Detroiters. Through intergenerational storytelling, ancestral preservation, and community engagement, we challenge the erasure of Black Detroit's past and work to amplify its future. And so I think that is like the core of like our vision, is making sure that it's always intergenerational, making sure that it's us and people who came before us, our ancestors who are helping us to lead this work, the children, the babies, like all of us telling this Detroit story and not just it being one-sided or one-dimensional.
Who are the forces, erasing Black Detroit? All right, because I want to get that. When you say that phrase, I'm like, there are people like intentionally pushing back on these stories.
Can I say something?
There's institutions. There are companies, perhaps.
If you go to Michigan Central Station, and they have this story about Detroit, and I don't know if you've seen the little film they have. And you can see, the Motor City, you can see assembly lines, you see all the people in Black Bottom before they pushed out, you see Motown. And then there's like this tremendous gap. And the Detroit I grew up in after 1967 is completely erased from that narrative. There's no mention of the Renson. There's no mention of the Charles Wright Museum. There's no mention of so many institutions and things that matter to me growing up in the city. There's no mention of techno and house music. It is almost as though Detroit stopped when white people decided to leave, and it came back when they came back. And so for me, that is just fundamental erasure, not to mention changing street names, changing neighborhood boundaries, reclaiming them as something different. That's my perspective on erasure. And it's the forces of capitalism. It's the forces of white supremacy. It is this thinking that everything that happens that's important is viewed through our lens and not through the lens of the people who are actually in those places. What do you think about that definition or that experience?
I think that I identify with that. I think of the African proverb that we reference often as saying, until the lion tells his story, the hunter is always going to be the hero. I think about the fact that, like, I refuse to call spaces Midtown like it's the Cass Corridor.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Shout
like,
out to you.
Just,
I lived in above Full Lucky for 4 years to know that feeling.
Right?
You know what I'm
And it's
saying?
just like,
that was a concoction of a woman named Sue Mosey in Midtown Incorporated. And the guy that owned Cass Corridor, a big portfolio that now is owned by the state of Israel. Through several
my sister
proxies.
worked at Harbor Light. That was her first job.
Yeah.
One of her first jobs, the Harbor Light, which was on Cass.
Yeah.
And it serviced people who were veterans returning from Vietnam, homeless people, people who were addicted to drugs. That was their home. That was where they lived. My mother went to Wayne State when I was a kid. And so when she attended there, Wayne State, it was gritty, right? It was like Detroit. And then when my parents got divorced, we moved to the Bellcrest Apartments right there on Cass, okay? And, it was, listen, I made so many friends, in the neighborhood and whatever. And this is where students who went to Cass Tech could live.
Right.
Now, if you go to Cass, you can't live near Cass Tech unless your parents have money. They had to build dorms so that people could live near Cass Tech.
I mean,
and
who Cass Tech students are living like right near Cass right now? If they're not living like next to senior homes.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Wayne State.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Let me thank you. A correction in real time. When you went to Wayne State housed students who lived near there, and you don't have that same kind of commuter campus feel. You almost have to live so far away. And it did feel intentional. It feels as though when we push these people out, now we can document to the world that this is worth something.
Yeah, my daughter and I lived, actually Marcia and I met, we had mutual friends and living in an apartment building, and I lived there with my daughter. That was whatever the rent was at the time. But then by the time I was moving out, they had these basement apartments that were like, now they're called garden level, and they're paying like $2,300 to like live in a basement, and it's like, that's the garden basement, level. Calling it garden level. And so I think that that's like the story. It's like, I ended up moving from that area because it wasn't friendly for families. We're catering to dog parks, and I think of a friend. My friend tells the story the best. She was walking down Cass, and there was a woman jogging, and she had a stroller, and she was coming down the street, and she jumped out of the way because she's like, let me get out of the way of this baby in the stroller, and this woman, like, trying to be healthy. And then the stroller passed her, and it was a dog in the stroller that the woman was pushing, and she was like, "Oh, Detroit is different. Like Detroit is changing in a way that like I can't even recognize it right now."
Right.
And then, I lived in East English Village about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I moved to East English Village. And I remember there was, you've seen the Nextdoor app. Be careful. We saw 3 males in hoodies walking down the street. We don't know what they're up to. And it's encouraging suspicion, right? And so I have a Super Bowl story because Super Bowl in 2014, I guess it was in 2015, Super Bowl in 2015, I went to my sister's house. And on the way back, I tried to pull into my driveway and I couldn't. And there were young black men with hoodies and hoods and gloves shoveling me into my driveway. And I thought, when they come with a shovel, we're grateful. But if they had been walking down the street with the exact same equipment, we would have considered them a threat on Nextdoor. It's that kind of coded racial language that I think becomes problematic. And then I'll never forget this one lady posted on Nextdoor, aunties, mamas, whatever, watch out for your men. They are, hold your men accountable. They're out here making me feel uncomfortable. And it was attacking black women because, according to her, black men were sexually harassing her. And it was black women who were at fault for not holding their men accountable. And the crazy thing about it is I heard this, right? And so me being me, I kind of, had some things to say right back on Nextdoor. And then I found out that this was somebody that was a contractor working for ECN. Mm-hmm. And, and otherwise considered herself, a very cool new Detroiter who was using very, again, coded racial language that it just feels like it's the microaggressions and the aggressions, right? It's the closure of the places we go and opening a dog park.
Is it the Bedrock ads with all white people? Yeah.
It's there used to be clubs I used to hang out in downtown Detroit. Those clubs are gone. And it's always, they should have owned the building if they really wanted to stay. There's always these explanations, but, there's fewer and fewer places that I think people feel welcomed in our city. Until 10 years ago, I don't remember the police rounding me up at 10 p.m. and telling me I had to get away from outside. Mm-hmm. I've been stopped by police on Belle Isle, on the Riverwalk, and on Campus Marcia's. I don't know whether that's because I'm a scufflaw or what, but I just like outside in the summertime.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And, I'm on the Riverwalk. I live off of the Riverwalk, and I'm being chased off of the Riverwalk at 10 p.m. just looking at the water. That is another form of, is it containment? Is it erasure? Is it this thing that you are working to guard against in many ways through your narratives by letting us reclaim this space and feel welcome here? So why don't we talk about the act of reclamation? What are you doing?
Yeah. Just kind of going back to what you said about erasure and this idea of Detroit being a blank slate, to say that and then also acknowledge the to acknowledge the really decades of Black leadership that were kind of overlooked and if not overlooked, then kind of blamed for the predicament of Detroit without any sort of acknowledgement for the role that the state of Michigan, the role that the federal government all played in bringing Detroit to deal with all these sort of economic difficulties that we have had to survive through. And so, I think for us, it's a matter of saying we were here, but also saying that we thrived here, that we built something here using what we had, and that we weren't waiting for anybody to recognize us or to give us anything. The community that folks built, when I'm learning the history, I want to shout out a new book called Freedom Enterprise by Kendra Boyd that talks about racial entrepreneurship in the Black migrant community. And in that book, she talks about how when we talk about the Great Migration, a lot of times we talk about these folks as unskilled workers coming here to work in these factories, but these were folks that were coming with all sorts of trades and skills and dreams. And a lot of what we're remembering and benefiting from when we talk about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley is just that. And so, it's one reason we talk about Black Bottom is to talk in honesty about the fact that it was a working class community, that it was 92% renters by the time that the destruction happened. But in addition to that, these were folks that, in spite of Jim Crow, in spite of arriving to Detroit with new forms of racism via redlining and segregation, they still were able to create these places. So, I think with reclamation, a part of it is acknowledging that history and acknowledging the ways that we continue to benefit from their sacrifices. I don't think it's a coincidence that the most profitable parts of the city right now are in Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. People going to Comerica Park, people going to Ford Field, people going to Greektown. And before they were these things, they were Black spaces that served so many different purposes for folks. I think reclamation is really important for us to make sure that it really is an attack on self-esteem for Black Detroiters, I think, the way our history is talked about. And so I think what we're trying to do is, through this intergenerational work, is to rewrite that narrative of how we understand how we came to be here, and remembering all the tools and strategies that our ancestors have used to survive in spite of these conditions.
I think that's wonderful. And what you're saying is so important. If the narrative is that Black people got the reins of government and failed, and that's the chosen narrative, then it becomes, well, let's give a white guy the chance, right? But if the narrative is accurately described as systems and institutions that failed us since we were stolen from the shores of Africa, if there's an acknowledgement that we did not come here as slaves, we came here as skilled people who were enslaved. We came here with our gifts, and these gifts were used to build America. We've always had those gifts. Whether we were in Jim Crow South, we had gifts. When we came to Detroit, we brought them with us. It's not as though, somehow there's this mindset or this depiction of us as not having things, not being things. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. And then Detroit gave people the opportunity to become so much more, right? And so what are some great stories about people, individuals that you can pull out?
Okay. One that I'll share, this is probably one of my, I shouldn't say that I have favorites. I love all of my storytellers. They're all so great. And I appreciate the vulnerability that everyone comes when they share their story. And one person whose story always sticks out to me is Rosie Chapman. And Rosie Chapman grew up on Hunt Street in Black Bottom. And she was one of the first oral histories that I did. And I'm so happy that it worked out that way, because she is a storyteller in her own right. And she does historical reenactments of Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. And months later, after I recorded her oral history, I found a brochure of her from the DIA in the 90s where she had a picture because she was doing a historical reenactment of Sojourner Truth. But she was somebody who, I think, gave a very different narrative about Black Bottom. And so, historically, Black Bottom, a part of how they justified destroying it was labeling it as a slum, which we know was also kind of happening at the same time that this invisible structure of redlining, where neighborhoods that were predominantly Black were just being labeled as slums. And so a lot of what we hear in our oral histories are people sharing a completely different narrative about what that community was like. And she's one of those people who talks about how, Black Bottom was a place where she didn't feel like she had to lock her doors, and where she, could find produce from her next door neighbor, and memories she had of, going to Brewster Wheeler Recreation Center, playing hand games. I hadn't heard of the Goodfellow boxes before I had talked to her. So just learning about all these informal and formal community structures and networks that existed that supported folks really gave me a lot to reflect about, even as I feel like a person maybe aging out of the young person description, but not quite, I know that those aren't things that I necessarily can recall. Like, I definitely had a village in terms of how I grew up, but I can't relate to this idea of just going to my neighbor and being able to get some flour because I need flour for a recipe.
Right. Talk about those Goodfellow boxes for those that aren't aware of that. I recently just learned this history.
Yeah. So it was like this annual tradition, happened around Christmas time. And what she talks about is that they used to have a girl type of box and a boy box. You got an outfit. For the girls, they got a doll, like underwear, socks, just kind of like thinking about your back to school kit. And so she even mentioned that she had a black doll, which some people, when we went to the St. Patrick's Center, they were like, I don't remember getting a black doll. But, she talked about getting a black doll and then going back to school after Christmas and everybody having on the same clothes.
Oh, wow.
Because, they were living in a community. And at one point, Black Bottom was more of a mixed class community. But as folks got access, that kind of changed and it became more of a working class community. So your neighbor has the same amount as you generally, right?
You didn't have neighborhoods that were as, divided by social class in those days.
Right.
There were fewer places for people to live, And so, yes, you didn't have this whole idea of class was not as well developed, I don't think. My mother talks about growing up in Detroit and not really having the mindset of class. I'm not saying that there were not Black people who did, but I'm saying for the most part it was a community, and this mindset was very different than it is now. We've become very separated. And in 2026, as we are this separated, we're dealing with a whole lot of things, and we don't really have each other to lean on in the same way we did then.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a lot of what I like when I think about this idea of Sankofa and go back and get it. I think that is one example of the instructions that are there for us and our understanding of what it's going to take for us to survive these times. The answers are in the past because we've survived tougher times and more difficult times. And so I think that's a part of why reclaiming and remembering our stories are so important, because it's important for us to know that we've done this before. We've navigated hard times before, and we've done that together. And so, yeah.
I think there's this narrative around Black thriving that Lauren, oh my goodness, I can't think of her last name.
Lauren Hood?
Lauren Hood, yes, thank you. Lauren Hood has been trying to conceptualize what is it like to thrive as a Black person when we associate thriving with capitalistic notions of thriving. A lot of times we find ourselves isolated, we find ourselves without community, we find ourselves hyper-competitive and not really having a community of people to lean on. I think about some people who are, extremely successful and they just don't feel loved or, supported. So I think it's important for us to reclaim that narrative, what it means. And certainly people in that era, there were a lot of struggles. There have always been struggles.
But I think that one of the things, like you mentioned before, Marcia saying like never borrowing a cup of flour from neighbors. One of the things that is like across the board, people saying that they didn't lock their doors, that sense of community, like they didn't worry about stealing because everybody had about the same amount. And so to be able to like have a community where like nobody locked their doors and everybody had the same and everybody was able to rely on each other to get through it. It's like, it's that thing of like when you're thinking about, Black thriving, what is the definition of thriving? This 2026 definition of thriving the same thing as what folks were considered in Black Bottom? Like they were surviving, they were, when we hear about it, people are always talking about not having a lot, but there was never any shortage of like belonging.
Right. My mother talks about, I always talk about this, that my grandmother always had enough food for them and anybody who wanted to eat. She'd invite everybody, and then, if kids wanted to come and they'd be sitting at the table, and my mother and her siblings would try to convince them there were worms in the food so they wouldn't eat their food and they could have more. But, that she really did reduce the, portion size depending on how many people had to eat. That sense of we're in this together. And I even remember as a kid, we go into everybody's house and have lunch. We're at Gwenny and Teresa's house today. We're at Evie and Angie's house today, Rhonda's house. That's how we lived. There was not the sense of division that you now see. And I think that, people don't know their neighbors right now. You can live right next door to somebody and the kids don't play outside. They're on their computers. Yeah. And the separation is something, first of all, human beings are social creatures. So you have high levels of depression, you have high levels of mental health issues. And I believe that this way that we are living is toxic and contributes to harm across the board. But in a group of people who are experiencing so much hatred, whether or not we acknowledge it, it's like hatred never went away. Donald Trump didn't make racism come back. It was here. And, you know, as a parent, you send your child to school and they experience it, and either they have the language to tell you what they're experiencing or they don't, because we don't talk about that anymore. So the narrative is important. How are you working with kids?
Oh, we that's our favorite. We're currently looking to build some curriculum for some of our work, but we're also we have a Preserving Black Legacy Fellowship, which is an intergenerational cohort. But we also, well, sorry, before I get ahead of myself, we're teaching people to tell the stories of their neighborhoods in the same way they were preserving the story of Black Bottom. And so they're in a 1-year-long cohort or fellowship, and they're preserving the stories of their neighborhood and taking it to tell it, to be able to share and preserve and archive those stories. We recently just released a coloring book that has coloring and activity pages that has Black Bottom history, but then it's also your family tree. How do you do oral history? How do you tell the story of your family? How do you get your grandma's recipe? To be able to put those things there. And so it's more than a coloring book. It's like a legacy that it could be done 10, 20, 30 years. It could be a different coloring book, a different experience, because all of those things, they change over time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so coloring books, where do you get one?
You get them online. You can go to our website, Black Bottom Archives, and then you can go and search Support Us by buying merch, and it's there.
Okay. All right. You know, we work with children. We work with the community. I would love to have you come out and share and do some storytelling here, and maybe bring some of the people. So what does membership look like? How many members do you have? You talk about your storytellers. Do they become members of Black Bottom Archive, or are they people who come to workshops? How does that work?
Oh, interesting. We don't have a membership. We do have a general term that we use of like our kinfolk, which is just generally our supporters. So you could be a storyteller, you could be a volunteer, a sustainer. So far, we've recorded 50 stories. Oh, wow. And we, like every archive, have a backlog that we are making our way through of transcribing, describing, and making them accessible online. And so, yeah, how we stay engaged with our storytellers, it's been great. So last year we had our Black Bottom Street View exhibit at the Michigan History Center pretty much for the bulk of the year, a good 10 to 11 months. And we love to use moments like that to bring our storytellers as speakers. So at Michigan History Center, we did have a panel where we talked with some folks in Lansing that have a similar story of being displaced. And so we kind of had a joint panel to talk about some of the parallels across our communities. We also have, shout out to Mr. George Williamson, and Miss Betty Jenkins, who also came and did some storytelling at our porch, which is one of the pieces of our Black Bottom Street View exhibit, is we have a porch that kind of looks like a replica of what a porch would look like in Black Bottom. Detroit Month of Design, last year we had our storytellers pop up. So really whenever we have a platform and an opportunity to share the history of Black Bottom, we love to do that by bringing folks who have that lived experience. And even if they're not able to come in person, we love to be able to play clips during presentations because it's always better to hear it from the source.
Okay. How many people were displaced from Black Bottom? I've heard differing numbers.
And I think you're going to continue to hear some differing numbers because there are some like just gaps in the archive. So we put out a zine called Sankofa Community Research Report. And in that zine, it's kind of a summary of some of our learnings that also include some archival research. Walter P. Reuther Library Archives is, one of the great sources for information around Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. And so when I was looking back at project reports about the different developmental projects that contributed to the overall destruction of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, so the numbers that I saw from that was probably around like 5,000 or so. But the issue with that documentation is that when the city initially started started the destruction, they weren't documenting the families. They started doing that after the project had already
And you're talking
started.
about 5,000 families, not
Yes.
5,000 individuals.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
And it happened over such a long period
It
of
did.
time that you push some people out, and then some people choose to leave, and then some people are left. And so, what was the time span that the
About 20 years.
about 20 years?
Yeah. So the photos from our Black Bottom Street View exhibit were taken by the city as part of the initial survey process. So, and those photos were taken between 1950 and 1951. And, you know, that's some of our last documentation of what the streets look like. But they say that it was completely destroyed, Black Bottom and Paradise Valley collectively, by 1971. And yeah, it's exactly what you said, is that it's hard to document it, partially because the city did not do that at the start. So there is a gap in records, and there's also just a literal gap in planning and housing commission records that are not in any sort of archive.
I think there's always a gap, though, in harm that's done to us, right? So nobody can tell you how many people were killed in Tulsa during that massacre. The numbers were like anywhere from 20 to 2,000, you know,
Yeah.
and the lack of record keeping just speaks to the dehumanization of
Yes.
people, because when it happens to them, they know the numbers. The fact this could happen and nobody can count is really crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And one thing I will say, just to shout out one of the pieces of our Sankofa community research work, is that through this project, we got in contact with someone who found Detroit Housing and Planning Commission records that were left on the side of the road about over 10 years ago. And those records document the families that were displaced from different projects. So
Records found on the side of the road. I mean, how does this even happen?
I mean, when you think about what was happening 10 plus years ago, and thinking about emergency management and just the mismanagement of just, you know,
Files.
just everything, right? Like people get their orders and, you know, clean out a building, and things like this end up on the side of the road. And so we've been working with him over the past year to make up a strategy to get those records in the Ruther archive. But in the interim right now, we have started digitizing and making a log of some of those families. And what's really great about having this is, one, it's not available anywhere else, but these are Great Migration records is the main thing. And so there's a lot of folks that have connections to Black Bottom and Paradise Valley that just don't know. And so this is really a big deal to see people who were born in 1919, who came from Georgia, who came from Alabama, who came from Mississippi. These records also show if they received any sort of relocation payment, where they relocated to. And these are all questions that are really...
Were relocation payments often given?
No.
No, they were.
No. And then even if they were given, right, so we're talking about over 90% of folks who were living there at that time were renters. So that already impacts the amount of money you could potentially get.
Were they renters? Were there other people who were homeowners through land contract who did not have deeds?
Yes.
Because I think that's the other thing. Because we didn't have access to mortgages, we did not necessarily own in the same way that we could document our ownership.
Yes.
And so that, you know, that it feels like even that is, you know, is sort of like masking it. And one of my questions and things I think about a lot is that, you know, in, let's say, beginning of the early 1960s, you had so much of the displacement completed, right? And people were living in really overcrowded places because they couldn't live everywhere. And one of those really overcrowded places was in the Virginia Park area, which boiled over into a rebellion, right? But I wonder about the correlation between mass displacement, concentration of people in overcrowded spaces, and keeping in mind that our ancestors were displaced from the South. They didn't come here. It was forced migration. They were fleeing terror. They were fleeing dehumanization. It's not as though it was an economic decision. Let's just go here and make some money, right? It is, so many people came here. My great-great-grandmother came here with my great-uncle because he was fleeing a lynch mob, right, in 1919 or thereabouts. So it's not always choice. So you're escaping Jim Crow terror. You come to Detroit. You're living in Black Bottom. You're pushed out into this other community where you really don't belong. Your bars are closed. Your restaurants are closed. You're in a blind pig, but the places with liquor licenses aren't open anymore. Do we think about correlating those two to understand what happened in 1967?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So one thing interesting that I found is that the NAACP did their own report to kind of get an understanding of what happened. They did that for the 1943 race riot. And actually, I'm not sure if they did it for 67. But what I will say is that both incidents, right, the 1943 race riot, 1967 rebellion, uprising, like it's a continuous tension that folks are responding to around housing discrimination, racial discrimination, police brutality.
But in 1943, in 1942, you had the Sojourner Truth riots, right? And that was white people attacking black people for moving into public housing that was named after Sojourner Truth, okay?
Right.
Who did you think this was built for, right? It's not your ancestor. But they attacked them in the Conant Gardens area for moving in, right? And then you have this so-called race riot, which is really and it's not the first time there was a riot, so-called race riot in the 1860s also, where you had white people attacking black people and exposing them to racial violence, pulling them off of streetcars and beating them, going into the neighborhoods and beating them. And then when they come into a black neighborhood, black people fight back. And it's like, oh, you're retaliating. No, you're defending yourselves. So much of what was happening in those days was violent resistance against black presence in spaces that white people wanted to protect. In 1967, I think you flipped that a little bit. And in 1967, it is violent resistance against the oppressive forces, not directed really at white people. It's really just directed at stores, at police, at everybody who's holding us back. So I think we lump them all the same. You know, my grandmother lived in East St. Louis. In 1917 in East St. Louis, you had attacks on black people in East St. Louis that was very, very similar to what was happening in Detroit in 1967, just 50 years later. So she lived through 1917 and then came to Detroit in 1967. And then she was here in 1943 as well. But I think about how history gets whitewashed because everything has the same name. And I think of race terror and rebellions as not deserving different names. You know what I'm saying?
And I think, I guess what I'm kind of drawing the connection to is that black folks at that time are still responding to the wound around being displaced, of being shuffled around the city according to what the city's interests were, of being sacrificed for whatever iteration of progress that the city decides that we're in. Because there's been multiple moments in which Detroit has said that this is a renaissance, this is a comeback. The destruction of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley was supposed to usher in another moment of comeback and renaissance. And now we're here talking again about 375 and how that needs to be reworked as a part of another version of development. So I think it's like that wound still carries, though, of like not being able to make space, of taking up space.
Absolutely. And then 50 years from 1967, what do you have? You have mass foreclosures. You have 1 out of 3 homes that are owned by black people taken in foreclosure. You have the government taking more homes in foreclosure than were taken in Black Bottom. You have more homes destroyed and demolished by the government than were destroyed in Black Bottom. And we call that progress because now it's no longer urban renewal, now it's blight removal. And it's the exact same methodology, except it's dispersed and it's never framed in terms of racial violence or violence against black people. Absolutely, that's the case. I just wanted to respond also because I think white people have a way of minimizing the harm they cause when they do things. And, you know, there's nothing in our history where black people have gone out and done to white people what they did to us in 1943, what they did to my grandmother's people in 1917. Look it up. It's a crazy stuff. And they called this 1917 to like 1919 the Bloody Summer. It happened in Chicago. It happened in East St. Louis. It happened all over the United States. Pogroms of violence against black folks. And so they did that. And then now in 2026, if you Google riot in Detroit, the only thing you'll hear about is 1967, which is what we did. They don't, their destruction gets whitewashed and wipes, even in Tulsa, look at what the destruction was caused in Tulsa. But 1967 is portrayed as the most violent incident in the history of the United States, the history, and it's like we had civil wars, we had all of these other things. That's the only reason I was just really getting funny with those words, because it's a pain point, obviously.
And it makes a difference, and it is intentional what words we choose to describe things, for sure.
Yeah, and we call it a rebellion. I just wanted to, it's important. So I love what you're doing. Who supports you? Where do you get your funds from?
Great question. Yeah.
When you were thinking earlier, when you mentioned about memberships, we don't have necessarily a membership campaign or a membership process yet. It's something that we've been thinking about, but we do have, we're running a sustaining donor campaign. And so we're looking for folks to be able to sustain us. And a sustainer means that you're making a monthly donation, $5, $10, whatever it is that people are able to afford. And it allows us to be able to offer programming and to keep our programming free. It's really important to us that our programming is as accessible as possible to Detroiters, all folks. And so, making those donations helps us with our programming a lot of times. And so I think we extended it to the end of February. We're doing a campaign. If you become a sustaining donor, you'll get some of our free merch. So we have stickers, we have zines, we have buttons.
All right. So how does somebody become a sustaining donor?
So you can go to, I'll give you the website in one moment.
All right. And while you're doing that, I think it would also be really cool if you partner with organizations like ours.
I would love to.
And we charge a fee. Come in and do presentations. Our community needs what you're offering.
Yeah.
Your presentations would be phenomenal. So I'm definitely going to follow up and set up a presentation with you. We don't have to during Black History Month. It's 12 months in the year, and we're all Black every month.
Yes.
So let's just plan it. But I think also, how do we get organizations to sustain you? Because if, when they say freedom ain't free, right? We got to somehow put our own money in it. We can't expect other people to own our history. This is a call to action to everybody who's listening to consider investing in the work that is preserving who we are. I want to just ask one more question about Jamon Jordan and the role he's played in your work.
Yeah, Baba Jamon has been a very loyal supporter of ours. He's been a mentor to us as an organization. We take his quotes, his learnings wherever we go. At this point, whenever you see the Black Bottom Street View exhibit, you will see his quote where he says, Black Bottom is the most historically rich, culturally significant neighborhood in the history of Michigan. And it feels really beautiful to be able to say that comes from the City of Detroit historian. And we partner with him often. We just had a panel last week that was all about intergenerational storytelling. And he was there. Whenever we need him, he really comes through for us. We've partnered on tours. We've partnered on programs. And we have some other interesting partnerships coming up this summer. Fingers crossed. Stay tuned. But yeah, Baba Jamon has been, a great supporter of ours and mentor.
That's just an example of intergenerational work. You're going to give the website.
Yes, if you go to our Linktree/Black Bottom Archives, it'll give you everything to purchase merch, to get a coloring book, make a donation. So all of those things are there.
Awesome. And I want to point out again, you talk about the multi-generational nature in which you guys are doing this work, right? Talking to young kids, talking to seniors and elderly folks. We were just having a conversation, maybe even last episode, sitting here talking about how can younger people that are, I'm 28, so it's like younger than me, how can we get involved in this work, right? Support organizations and causes and efforts like your guys's, because we also have a really significant piece, people under 30 years old right now, in sustaining, maintaining this history. And that's got to be, thinking about Black Bottom Archives in 100 years, and the work that you guys are going to be doing now will live on. Fact, right? I think about that in my own writing these ridiculous articles every single day. I'm like, well, maybe they'll still be online.
This is an intergenerational podcast, right? And intentionally so.
Yes.
It is intentionally looking at Detroit from the lens of people who access it in different spaces. It's so important that we do that work.
Yeah. We are here with Marcia Black and Lex Draper Garcia Bey.
Yeah.
The co-executive directors of the Black Bottom Archives.
Are there other intergenerational older folks who have contributed to. I just want to give you one moment to shout anybody else out that you may have.
Oh, there's just so many folks.
Mama Marcia.
Mama
sure,
Marcia.
yeah.
You know, I think of our advisory council of the Preserving Black Legacy. There's Mama Jara. There's
Sharon Saxton.
I think that there's so many. You don't want to name
Dr. Desjardins.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to give you a minute to also acknowledge some of the people who have done the work.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, we wouldn't be here without them, honestly. I mean, one thing that I think is so important to understand about why we are still talking about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley today, and it's not because of the work that the city has done to remember and share this story. It's because of the commitment of Black folks to make sure that this history is remembered, whether that be through, you know, the Miller High reunions that continue to happen, whether that be through the formal and informal Duffield Elementary School meetups, Baba Jaman giving tours through Black Scroll Network. The reason why there is a historical marker was because of a grassroots effort to put that historical marker there that we didn't get until 2020.
Right.
So we truly are benefiting from the work that many generations have done to make sure that there's anything that we can pull from to remember, any stories for folks to share. I mean, the reason why we've been able to connect with so many storytellers is because they've been committed to staying connected and to remembering Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. So we definitely benefit from that.
Awesome. All right, we're going to take our last break, and then when we get back into it, we're going to do some quick shout-outs.
Eastside Community Network is proud to support Rise Higher Detroit, a transition guided by community, built on collaboration. Mayor Sheffield wants to hear from Detroiters, and your input in this citywide survey will help shape what comes next. Stop by ECN and ask for Juanita to complete the survey in person, or take the survey today by visiting our website at ecn-detroit.org.
Welcome back, everyone. We are still here with Marcia Black and Lex Draper Garcia Bey, co-executive directors of the Black Bottom Archives. We want to thank them for joining us today, talking about preserving our history, something that this city, you know, as they're tearing down this Highland Towers building in Highland Park, the first underground parking garage, the Midwest architectural people on Twitter will tell me. You know, it's really important that we talk about these stories and talk about the people that are working to preserve these stories. And so you guys, you know, I'm a fan. You can count me in as a fan, as a supporter.
Yeah.
You can check out their exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum going on right now. But if you guys listening have topics or guests that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Visit our website, authentically-detroit.com. Donna, I know you want to remind everybody about Orlando Bailey's send-off celebration at the Stoudemire this Saturday.
Yes, we're having a celebration to honor a toast to Orlando, who is a co-host and co-founder of the Authentically Detroit podcast, who recorded his last podcast in January of this year, as he has moved on into different things. But we miss him, we love him. He will always be part of us, and we're going to celebrate him on Saturday. Please come through at ECN and 4401 Connor, Detroit, Michigan 48213. Go to our website so that you can register, because we have limited space. And also feel free to bring a gift. We're going to have music. It's going to be a lot of fun. But we're honoring one of the best in the Detroit broadcast space.
Yeah. All right. Now, time for shout-outs. Let's start with you, Donna. You want to shout anyone out?
I do. I have a couple of people to shout out. I want to shout out a couple of the historians that have impacted my life. Teola Hunter and Honorable Teola Hunter and Doris Rhea, who have been like mentors of mine, people who have influenced me. And Teola gave me a book the Detroit Near East Siders, which includes some of the legacy, although it's not just Black Bottom. And I also want to shout out P.G. Watkins and my daughter Camille Johnson for their role in helping to establish this organization.
I wanted to shout out all of the therapists and mental health professionals in the world this past, the entire holiday season, winter depression, Valentine's Day. It can get really hard for folks. I just spoke to a man who was a therapist. His name is Marquin Evans. He currently does wedding videography. However, we just had a conversation and just about, this time of year for folks. I want to shout out and uplift all of the people that, work with others to counsel their grief, folks going through, financial issues that can be overwhelming. So shout out to all of you guys, Siobhan Bradley, people that are therapists to other people in my life, Patrice Lucas. Shout out to, I'm forgetting her last name. I won't even say it because I'm embarrassed that I forgot her last name, but she was my therapist for a long time. So shout out to all the mental health professionals out there in the world. Shout out to them.
Okay. You have any shout outs?
I want to shout out all of the family historians and folks who keep their family stories alive, the folks who gather the pictures and the photo albums, and the folks who you're calling when you want to tell the story of different family members. When you're trying to find that one picture that that you saw 50 years ago, and you're like, somebody got it, and that person knows where to get it. And I also want to shout out anybody who's inspired to just begin telling or documenting a story. We tell folks when we have our workshops that these devices that we all carry around are ways in which you can archive and preserve your family. And so they're just, even if you're just getting a phone and recording a grandmother or someone, asking them questions about their life, I want to shout out anybody who's inspired to start.
I want to shout out my mom, whose 50th birthday celebration is this weekend, and I'm so excited to celebrate her. I wouldn't be here without her. Absolutely. And then I also want to shout out my team and any person who is a Black cultural worker surviving Black History Month, because we do indeed celebrate Black history every month of the year. And I know we are feeling the pressure to cram it and be everywhere all the time. And so, shout out to you for doing that work and, sending an extra boost to energy for everybody who's feeling that pressure for Black History Month.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And for those who are listening, don't forget to become a sustainer of the Black Bottom Archives.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to sign up today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. And we will be back next week with another episode of Authentically Detroit. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Where we moving on, where we moving on.